Hey guys, I'm Jessica and I am here today to talk to you about outlining. There are a lot of videos on outlining on YouTube, so I'm not going to explain what outlining is or anything like that. I'm just going to talk about why I think outlining is important and how I outline. First of all, I don't really like outlining. I feel like it's taking some of the fun away from planning. Part of what I like about writing is discovering things as I go along. Especially with like mystery stories, I love realizing things later on in the story that I didn't have planned in the beginning. And if I plan out every single step, then that takes all the fun away from it. A few years ago, not for NaNoWriMo, I decided to write a novel and I decided to outline everything because the problem I was getting into was I was starting a novel and it was veering off into somewhere crazy and it was really hard to edit because I ended up with all of these jumbled scenes and really no coherent way to put them together. So I outlined literally every scene, or every major scene, and I thought it was a pretty good story and I started writing it and it immediately changed as soon as I started writing it, and I realized I didn't want to go re-outline everything and I was stuck. In that instance, my outline was not flexible enough for me to do much with it. So that's one of the reasons I don't like outlining. In teaching, we have this thing called backwards design planning. And what that is we think about the end of a unit and what we want students to know and what we want students to be able to do. And then we go back and plan our lessons with that in mind. So the same should be done with writing a novel. You should know where you want your story to be and where you want your characters to be at the end of the story before you start it. That way, even if you get off track a little bit, it's okay because you're still heading to that same point. So once you know what the resolution of your story is, you can do a couple things. You can go back and start planning from the beginning, or you can plan the climax or the turning point of your story. So every story has a climax. This is the peak of the action. This is the point of no return. So after this point happens, the story changes completely. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo kills himself because he thinks Juliet has died. If he hadn't have killed himself, they could have worked it out. It could have been a happy ending, but since he killed himself, that sealed the plot. Like, you can't bring him back. It's not a paranormal story. So knowing the twist, knowing what your turning point is going to be, is going to allow you to add some foreshadowing in your rising action. And you might actually do this without knowing you're doing it. If you just start your story without knowing what that turning point is or what your resolution is, there's no telling what you're gonna write about, and it's gonna be really hard to edit after you're done with the story. Usually when I come up with an idea, the first thing I think of is how I want it to start. And I know this is different for everyone, but I always have like that first paragraph in my mind. Like, I know exactly how I want it to start. And I think that's because I'm obsessed with the beginnings of books and movies, and even some TV shows. Just, I think that opening scene, that opening introduction is so important. So people plan out their plots in different ways. Some people use the act structure. Some people just write a list on Word of scenes they want to include. I pulled something out of my teaching materials. This is a plot diagram. I hope you can see this. So 99% of stories follow this. So you have your exposition, where you introduce your characters and your setting. You have your rising action, where the bulk of the story takes place. Your turning point, your falling action when things are slowing down, and then your resolution. One thing I do is I fill out one of these for my story. And you don't have to get very specific. You just put general things that you want to happen on here as a guide for when you're writing your novel. And you can even fill out one of these for each of your storylines. For example, I'm going to have at least 2 major storylines. I'm going to have one with the mystery in the novel, and then I'm going to have one that's kind of a romance. So I might fill out one of these for each of them just to keep me on track. So having that introduction, climax, and resolution planned out, that gives me a good roadmap. So when I'm starting my story, I know that I'm working towards point B, which is the climax, and point C, which is the resolution. But in between that, I have a little bit of flexibility. That means if I want to add characters, if I want to add little storylines, I can, because I've got the big things mapped out and I know I'm gonna get to that point. So this year I want to come out of NaNoWriMo with a mostly complete manuscript that I can go back and edit without wanting to kill myself. I have edited the first maybe quarter of my other two NaNoWriMo manuscripts before they really got off track. I think the first novel I wrote didn't really get off track, but the second novel I wrote for NaNoWriMo actually ended up with two different endings, which were completely different, and I couldn't decide which one I liked more, so I kind of just tucked it away and haven't looked at it since. So when I started planning my novel for this year, I just opened up a Word document and typed as much as I could about what I wanted the novel to be about. I always like to capitalize on that moment when I'm really excited about the story and write as much as I can about it before it starts getting difficult. So from that Word document, I came up with some of the main characters and the general storyline. I don't really have my twists yet. I have an idea of where my story's going. I know what I want, like, the point of the story to be, and I know the purpose of it, but I don't quite know what's going to happen yet. But that's really exciting. This is the exciting point before you really know everything. So my goal for the next couple of days is to come up with a broad So my goal for the next couple of days is to come up with an outline like I described, and then I want to start thinking about how I'm going to structure my story. What do you think? I hope you guys are having a fun time planning for NaNoWriMo. Make sure that you add me as a writing buddy on NaNoWriMo. Yeah, tell them. Also, make sure that you like this video and subscribe if you would like to. I will see you again in a couple days. Say bye. Say bye.